Good evening, everyone. My name is David Matney with Nebraska Realty here in Omaha, Nebraska, and just want to welcome you to tonight's live stream. I got a very special guest and I got lots of questions. So hopefully we'll have some great questions in the chat. But my guest this evening, we're going to talk all about home inspections, and we're going to talk about home inspections and some of the particulars in the Omaha market. But what I'd like to do is bring on my guest tonight. My guest tonight is Bob Corsini with Corspect Advanced Home Inspections. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Bob onto the stage. Hey, Bob, welcome to the program.
David, how are you? Thank you for having me.
All right, terrific. Well, hey, Bob, thanks for coming on tonight. And I got lots of questions. I know you got lots of knowledge, and you do such a great job of educating folks in the home inspection process. But tell us a little bit about how you got into the inspection business and how long you've been doing. I know we've been working together for several years, but how long have you been doing it, and how you got into the business and everything?
Well, it's an interesting life story, David. Thank you. And yeah, we have been working together for a number of years, and I appreciate being here to help you and help your clients. My background is in construction, but a lot of people don't realize how I got into construction. In my late teens and 20s, I was a professional skier, downhill skier. And I skied all over the world. I skied several hundred days a year sometimes, traveled all over, a wealth of information, and had a great lifestyle. But in the off season, I would do construction because that's what I did. And I really loved it. I had a passion for it. And you'll learn to do something better than the guy you're paying to do it. And I got to buy the tool, the equipment. And it led from, working under a builder, doing framing, to eventually being a project manager. So I knew everybody's job better than they did. And then, it evolved into, I want to have my own business. And I researched for 6 months, and this was 20 some years ago. I researched for 6 months how to start a state-of-the-art home inspection business, something that I looked at what everybody else was doing. And I thought I can combine my background, which is unheard of in the construction business, with state-of-the-art technology and combine that into a business that is far beyond what was being done. And Corspect, for instance, has 6 different trademarks on the name, and it's not a franchise. I built it. I built it to be the business in this industry, so I'm proud of it.
Absolutely. And people got to know that all inspectors are not created equal. And what's nice, what I like, Bob, when I work with you is, when I refer my clients to you, they get you. They don't get someone who just started 2 weeks ago that took a class or that sort of thing. So I really appreciate that. And then talk a little bit about some of your technology, because you do some stuff that talk about your camera, is it the FLIR? Is it called a FLIR camera?
Yeah. So quite a number of years ago, I was looking at the home inspection business when I started it, and this was 20 years ago. And I was looking at what can I bring to the industry that's not being used to be ahead of everybody else and give somebody a more in-depth look at a house. And I came up with the idea of using thermal imaging. It had been used a little bit, but not extensively. And these cameras, probably because these cameras aren't cheap, the one I have is $20-some thousand. They've filtered into different aspects of our life. I know fire departments have them to find kids in smoke-filled houses. Right. It is a remarkable tool in the electrical business for some of your high-end power lines, but it hadn't really been used in the inspection business. So this camera, what it does is it actually looks into the building envelope. It looks through walls. It can look for moisture, water infiltration. It can look for insulation deficiencies. It's a remarkable tool. And what I did was I incorporated it into the business at no extra cost. So there's no extra cost to the client. I'm absorbing the cost of this camera. I'm just very busy. And it's a wonderful tool. And so I find that I've had my business in a couple municipalities. And every time I'm there after a couple of years, somebody starts to follow my lead and picks up a thermal camera. And I take that as a compliment that following my lead as the leader in this business.
Exactly.
So it's appreciated. The other thing we do is I have a very expensive drone. Most inspectors don't climb a roof anymore at all. And I joke with people and I say, you know, I do climb a roof still, if it's a walkable pitch and a survivable fall. But otherwise, I have a drone with a 20 megapixel camera and a zoom lens on it that I can get to any roof, any chimney, count the grains of asphalt in the shingles. It's a remarkable tool. Why wouldn't we be using this? But these other inspection services do not do this.
Yeah.
And I like the technology combined with my background to provide people with that type of service.
Excellent. Excellent. You know, Bob, if you know you're in the Omaha market, but not everybody in another market has an access to Bob. So what questions should someone ask to vet a home inspector? What are some things they should look for and things like that?
One of the biggest things is just the experience. I mean, you have to have somebody that's been in the construction business and not just as a contractor doing framing, but know every aspect of the construction business for 10, 15, or 20 years. We have services here as well as other areas around the country where these guys will take this ASHI exam, it's called, or AHIT, which is a national exam that you can pass with studying for 2 weeks. There's just a wealth of knowledge in being in the construction business for 20 to 30 years that you can't get with studying for 2 weeks for an exam. And so that's the scary part. Look at the background that these people have and talk to the inspector that's going to do the inspection. Some of these services have 6 or 8 inspectors, and the average age is a kid that's 25 years old. Nothing wrong with that, but he doesn't have the background to go into depth into the home construction and deal with the things that could arise in any house.
Yeah, no, good point. How many inspections do you think you've done over the years? Have you ever tried to count those? Or
you know, it's funny. I was just looking at my list of inspections the other day, and let's see, I'm averaging 400 to 500 a year for the past 20, 25 years. So I'm in the 10,000 range, 10 to 15,000 range as far as inspections.
wow.
It adds up fast, but apparently, you know, I enjoy what I do and I'm going to keep at it.
That's great. What should a first-time home buyer know about the home inspection process?
Well, the biggest thing is probably to want to show up and meet with your inspector when he's done. Not necessarily to show up and follow him around and distract him. Let him concentrate on what he does, but show up and talk to him. There's a wealth of knowledge in meeting with the inspector from just a home ownership standpoint. If that inspector is good at what he does, he'll teach you about aspects of that house that are different from any other house you could be looking at. And so that's the biggest thing is just the education that an inspector can instill in his job. So you need somebody with a background, you need somebody willing to meet with you and kind of talk to you and coach you through the buying process.
Exactly. No, and I think that you do a really good job of that. And I've taken every time that you've done an inspection, I have taken something away from it and learned something to help. A lot of the stuff that you've taught me turned out to be content for this channel.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you.
How long does an inspection usually take?
Well, it depends on a couple things. I mean, it depends on the square footage of the house. And so a lot of inspectors, their pricing for the inspection is based on square footage because that's an equation in the time frame. It's also based on the age and condition of the house. So a lot of times when I'm booking an inspection, I'll Google the house and look at the house online, and I'll know how old it is, how many square feet it is, what the general condition is. If it's on Zillow, I'll browse through some photos and I'll know down to within about a half hour of how long that house is going to take me just based on my experience. I would say the average inspection, just the inspection process on an average 2,500 square foot house is going to take about 3 hours.
3 hours. Okay.
Now, you got to understand too, I do my reports back at my home office, so that saves an hour and a half.
Okay. Okay.
So, the inspection process with putting the report together should be in the area of 4 to 5 hours.
Gotcha. Okay. And you have a great report as well. What do you see? What is the typical cost, or what's the typical cost of a home inspection?
About a 2,500 square foot house should be around 495, and that's pretty consistent. I have a friend on the East Coast that I trained actually, and helped him get into his own inspection business because he had a great construction background. East Coast, New York, New Jersey, you got about a 30% increase over that, so you're going to be up in the $700-800 range for that same square footage. Same with the West Coast. But here in the Midwest, for a typical 2,500 square foot house, you're going to be in the area of about $495. And that, for me, includes complete thermal imaging, testing everything. People ask me, do you have a list of things you look for? And basically what I tell them is, if you can think of it, I will have looked at it.
What about the cost of a radon test? How much does a radon test cost?
Radon averages for the test about $125 from my business. You have to understand, I don't do both. I don't do the mitigation also. So I find that a conflict of interest, that I would have a vested interest in the results. But the radon test costs approximately $125 additional. It's also a monitor that's calibrated yearly that has to sit in the environment for a minimum of 46 hours because it takes air samples.
Gotcha. And, for some folks that, because we had folks that join us from all over the nation, explain to folks about radon and why it's important to test for it, and just a little bit about radon for those folks that don't know, and that sort of thing. Absolutely.
No, I know what you're getting at. Radon is being attributed to being the number one form of lung cancer now for a non-smoker. The Midwest it's higher and more prevalent than many other areas around the country. So it becomes more of an issue here that we definitely want to test for it to see what the levels are. We can easily do mitigation, and the mitigation is very successful. It drops radon to within 1 picocurie per liter on the average, which the EPA standard is 4.0 picocuries per liter. So it is something that's very important that we test for, we're educated about, and if necessary, we do a mitigation system. It's just part of our environment, and we need to be aware of it.
Yeah. And then how long does the radon, take us through the process with the radon test, as far as how, you schedule it on a Monday, you set the meter, and then pick it up on Wednesday, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I can do individual radon testing or incorporate it with the inspection for a client. If I have an inspection that's several days away, and you have a certain time frame to accomplish the inspection and have results back based on their real estate contract, I'll go and place the monitor at least 2 days ahead of time, so I meet my minimum of 46 hours that it's taking air samples. If we're really busy and I'm doing a last minute inspection and we want radon, I always have monitors with me, and I can place one at that time in the house, but then I need to come back and pick it up 2 days later and download those results. The monitors we used are called continuous alpha monitors. So they take an air sample every hour. They're tamper-proof. I can tell if people open windows or doors and try to fudge my tests. I can tell if they move the monitor. This is all based on Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services requirements.
Okay. I've got a question here from Davion M. What percentage of places in Omaha have radon issues? That's a great question.
That is a good question. I looked at the numbers, and out of 10 radon tests, about half to 80% will be higher than the EPA standard of 4.0 picocuries per liter, which means we want mitigation. Of course, the lower we can get, the better. I mean, if we can get 0.1, that's great, but that usually requires a mitigation system. I do have some areas of Omaha, just based on the track record, that are higher than other areas. As I get up around West Shores, around the lake up there, I find that the soils are rather sandy, and I have very few. I will have about a 20% percentage-wise that radon levels are above 4.0. Whereas if I get down more towards Bellevue or Plattsmouth, I will find that 80 to 90% of my radon tests are higher than the EPA standard. So it depends on the soils. But the myth does come up, and I've heard all the wives' tales too.
Yeah.
If you forgive me, that people have said, well, it's a walkout, so it's not going to have radon, or it's a garden level, it's not going to have radon. I tested a townhouse on a slab last year that had no basement whatsoever. That was 14.9 picocuries per liter.
Wow.
So it depends on the soils underneath that particular house. You can drive in a neighborhood and see radon mitigation pipes on the outside of houses if you know what to look for. Yep. But I can test the particular house that the client's buying and have low levels. It's about the soils underneath that particular house.
Gotcha. So what about I've heard the other one where poured foundation versus a cinder block or brick foundation. Is there any truth to that, or
no?
None
it is strictly about the soils, and I've been through it all. I've been doing this for such a long time that and it's kind of like MythBusters. You want to know whether it's true or not, these myths. Right. And so I've gone out of my way to go back and do testing. I've seen it all. But no, it doesn't depend on whether it's a full basement, what I call an 8-foot dig, or a walkout. It's not about the foundation wall. It's not about the season. I've heard people say, well, based on the season, it should be higher in the winter and lower in the summer. No, that's another myth. If the radon levels are high, they're going to stay fairly high. They don't fluctuate year to year. Or based on the weather, whether it's raining or sunny, high pressure, low pressure system. It's all about the soils underneath that particular house. So I would encourage people to do a radon test.
Gotcha. MH08, are Home Depot radon tests any good?
Oh, very good. Home Depot and any of the home improvement stores sell a carbon kit that you can buy. That kit is in the range of $40 to $50. And you mark down on that kit when you open them and where you place them, and then you can leave them for a longer period of time. And then you close them, mark the date and time you closed them, and you mail them off to the lab. I've placed those kits next to my monitors because, again, I wanted to see, are they that accurate or are they not accurate at all? They are right on the money. And my monitors are $1,000 a piece just to buy my monitor. And they have to be calibrated every year. Now, the only problem with those kits is that if we're doing it, and that's the reason we can't use them in a real estate transaction, is somebody, meaning a seller, can fudge those tests. They can pick up that kit that was placed downstairs and place it outside for 3 days and then bring it back inside. You can't do that with my monitor. If you move my monitor, it tells me. If you unplug my monitor, it tells me. If you touch a button on it, it tells me. So it's a foolproof thing. Now, the good part about the kits is that you can do a longer-term radon test. In a real estate transaction, we need the test back within a couple days to move on or not with the real estate transaction. And the minimum based on the EPA is 46 hours of testing for my machines. The kits you could set up if it's your own house. You could set up a kit and test, leave it active for 3 months and close it and mail it off to the lab. And you'll have a longer term average of what that radon level is, which may help you if we're on the cusp, meaning 3.9 versus 4.1 picocuries per liter. Right. But I will tell you, if we do a 48-hour test with one of my monitors, it'll come out basically right on the money with any of these kits after a 3-month test.
Gotcha. Okay.
To answer that question very simply, those kits you can buy are very accurate and they work very well.
Okay. This is adding to the earlier question. Are there parts of town that are more radon prone than others? That's another great question.
Yeah, and we just talked about that. As I get more towards Bellevue and Plattsmouth, the levels seem to be much higher, just based on the track record. If I get up into the Northwest, around the lake up there, called West Shores or any of those, the radon levels seem to be a little bit lower. And I think it's because the soils are a little sandier. But that seems to be the drift. But there's no rhyme or reason either. I mean, I can test a house up there and all of a sudden it's 8.9 picocuries per liter. So you just have to test the particular home that you're looking at.
What's the highest you've ever seen a radon?
I've had levels of 30 to 40 picocuries per liter. The sad part is that the house I did this in test in for a buyer was down in Plattsmouth. Mm-hmm. And I did the test and it came out that high. And then I heard that the homeowner who had lived in the house for 28 years, I think, was in hospice with lung cancer. And those are the ones we're directly attributing to radon exposure. So radon exposure with lung cancer is a long-term issue, but it's something we can prevent. And especially if you're going to have kids in the house, we need to look out for the kids.
Gotcha. Okay. What causes, can you talk a little bit about what causes radon, how it's the breakdown of, is it uranium that in the soil?
Yeah, it's the type of rock, stone, that is in the Midwest underneath the soils that is decomposing, giving off these isotopes that are what's called alpha particles. It gives off alpha particles called polonium-214 and 218. They're microscopic. They're 100 times the size of a water molecule. And what that does is, people talk about radon gas. The gas isn't the radon. The gas is the transport agent of these alpha particles. And the alpha particles attach themselves to the mucous membrane in the lung, therefore changing the DNA, which is you got lung cancer.
Gotcha. Okay. I learned something else there. I thought it was a gas.
No, the gas is just strictly the transport agent.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit. Oh, we got, and I got another one here. Will that affect the price of the property?
Not really. The radon's so common and it's so easily mitigated that it should not affect the price of the property. Now, a radon mitigation system is going to run an average of $1,000 to $1,200, but it will take care of any radon issue that's with the property. The $1,000 to $1,200 is merely a fact of who's going to pay for it. So if you wanted to say, yes, I have a $400,000 home and it has high radon levels and a mitigation system is going to cost $1,200, yeah, it somewhat affects the cost of the property, but it's not going to be a deal breaker because it's so common in the Midwest. It's just, it's an acceptable evil that we need to know about it. We need to mitigate if it's high, and just pay the price and get it taken care of. A lot of times, and this is your forte, David, in a real estate transaction, do people split the cost of it? Does the seller pay? Does the buyer pay? It's all based on value of the house.
Exactly, and it's a health and safety issue. So a lot of times the seller, and a lot of times you talk to the seller ahead of time. Hey, if they do radon and they find it, more than likely they're going to ask you to mitigate for it.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So it's just something that that goes along with that. There's my friend Clark. Hey, Clark. All right. He says hello. And then let's see here. Grace Roby says, hi, David. Were you at the Nate Bargatze show? I thought I saw you. I was not. I don't even.
I got to tell you, I love Nate Bargatze as a comedian. I knew he was in town. I wanted to get tickets. We didn't get the chance to go, but he's a comedian that is clean, that you can bring the family to. He is quite funny. I love his work.
I'm such a 100% real estate nerd that I thought Nate Bargatze. I'm like,
that?
I'm like, I haven't been on his podcast or his live stream, or but so I was not there, but if I was there, it would be to get B-roll for the channel. So, but I'm glad I'm glad I didn't embarrass my. I'm glad that you knew who Nate Brigazzi was. I'm like,
Oh, I know. I knew he was in town too. I just didn't get a
I'm like, I
chance
don't
to
know who
go.
that guy is. I'm like, it doesn't sound like any agent I know or any live stream that I've been on.
Well, I'll tell you, the nice part about Omaha is we do get a lot of, top of the line performers that come through Omaha. And the venues here are easy to access, unlike the bigger cities where you can't even get a ticket. So it's really, I do enjoy Omaha for a lot of reasons.
Now, let me ask you this, because you relocated to Omaha, what was your biggest surprise, or what's something that you didn't expect when you got here? What kind of was the something that you didn't think moving here that you didn't think you would?
I think the nice balance in the climate. Don't get me wrong, we go from like one extreme to the other. But as opposed to many areas around the country, I've got a friend that lives in Phoenix, and he goes, "Yeah, you got to come down. It's only 115 degrees." I'm like, "But that's all the time." And then, a little further north here, it's the tundra, 8 months out of the year. So we kind of do have a nice balanced climate. You can travel and get out of here when you want to. We've got, for Omaha, you wouldn't think Omaha has the cultural activities that we do, and we really do, with the Orpheum Theater and shows. We've got some great restaurants. Oh my, we've got some great restaurants in this town. So if you're a foodie, you can get from one extreme to the other. And we're kind of safe and protected as far as better than anybody, real estate values. They don't spike and they don't drop out the bottom either. We got a nice steady increase. It's always a good investment. So it's a well-rounded little city. And in fact, I think Omaha was rated one of the number one places to live several years ago by Money Magazine because of all those things. So you really, people, when they talk to me that I've lived other places around the country, they go, Omaha, why Omaha? It's really a nice venue here.
Exactly. Let's see. Grace says, "Glad I didn't say hi. I thought I saw you, a local celebrity." Okay. All right. Let's see. Clark has, oh, this is a good question. Do you suggest people do a mold test be done during the inspection? Because I know there are mold spores in the air. That's a great question.
That is a good question. So that's something I'm always looking for. As much as of all the high-tech equipment I have, whether it be a $20,000 thermal camera, a $5,000 drone, a $1,000 moisture meter in my bag, I'll tell you, one of the best tools I have is to come from the outdoors, walk down into a basement and take a big sniff. And I'll tell you what, you can pick up on a mildew issue in a second if you're in tune with this. I do it with gas leaks. I've walked in houses that people are living with a gas leak that they just don't realize what it is. But if there's indications, whether it be by smell in a basement, or a lot of times when I open up a humidifier cartridge, looking at what's called the water panel, and there's a mildew issue there, then yes, one of the major things I'll recommend at that point is a professional duct cleaning with the disinfectant option to clean out any potential spores that are in the HVAC system. I can also do swipe tests, air tests, whatever needs to be done, and send them off to a lab. But I want to have verifiable issues that I can identify before we do that and we start charging for that. Because I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, it's basically a matter of doing a professional duct cleaning more than anything else.
Okay. Good point. This kind of change the angle on it. What can a seller do to prepare for a home inspection?
Well, one of the best things is do a pre-inspection, to have an inspector, a qualified inspector, come to the house and do an entire inspection so that they can lay everything out on the table as to what they have. It'll also give them a list of to-dos, because I'll find a to-do list on any house. I'm sorry, you can put me in a brand new $3 million house out here in Elkhorn, and I will give you a list of things that the builder either didn't do properly or needs to be taken care of. So the pre-inspection will give them a list of things that they can take care of on an item by item basis to be ready to sell the house.
Well, and I don't know if you remember or not, but a few years ago, we had a situation to where we did the pre-inspection and you discovered a crack in the furnace flue. And that was an immediate safety issue because that's carbon monoxide in the house.
Boy, I'll tell you, yeah, that I've had that happen 5 or 6 times in my career. In fact, I think I told you that the last one I had like that, the gentleman was, the family was living in the house, and I inspected the furnace and did a carbon monoxide test, and I had no elevated levels of carbon monoxide at the furnace, and I walked around the back of the furnace inspecting the flue pipes, and there was a gash in this flue pipe that you could stick your fist in. And the seller in the house, of course, we finally now in Nebraska have to have carbon monoxide testing units in the house. Yeah. And this family didn't have any, and the guy has 3 young kids, 3 young daughters. And I walked around and this was a seller. And I said, hey, I got to show you something. And I showed him and I said, do you have the ability to get any duct tape, as in the silver duct tape, not your gray stuff as in normal duct tape, but stuff, HVAC professionals use because it was cold, it was winter, and the furnace has to run. And he goes, why? And I showed him this major hole in the flue vent. And he says, I just had this furnace serviced last week. He goes, why wouldn't they have found this? I said, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. And he goes, this is pouring carbon monoxide into the house. And I said, yeah. And he looked at me and he started crying. He goes, dude, you just saved my whole family.
Wow. Yeah.
So it happens. It happens more than you think.
It does. I believe it. MH08 says maybe a long-term homeowner should do an inspection, say every 10 years or so. Does that ever occur? Do you ever have folks that do that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started my business up in Rochester, Minnesota, many years ago, I had a lady call me. Her husband was a surgeon at Mayo, and she had this large house, 8,000 square feet on the main floor. And the basement, she had duct taped over all the supply registers, and I had mold on all the floor joists. Okay. So, it's not bad. And many times I have people call me on a routine basis that they just want a list of things to do to the house that they need to know to budget for, to put on the calendar as far as exterior painting or what to expect with the house. People's backgrounds as a professional, they don't need to know the things I know. They specialize in certain things. And so they can stick to their specialty. I can help them with mine. But yeah, I think an inspection every 10 years, if you're in a house, is not a bad idea whatsoever. I think it's a great investment.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. How does Nebraska's climate with the hot summers and the cold winters, how does that impact on the home? What do you see? What kind of effects do you have like that? Maybe talk a little bit about the humidity and things like, moisture and things like that.
Yeah, so our climate here can be tough. It's a balanced climate, but we can go from one extreme to the other. Last summer I climbed in my truck and I saw a temp of 104 degrees outside. And then last winter, we had a great winter last winter, except for about a 10-day period that went to 35 below zero. Mm-hmm. So we go from one extreme to the other. And people, one of the teaching things I do, and you've heard me do this on every single inspection, is to teach about indoor humidity based on our climate here. That is, the temperature drops outside, we want to lower the humidity levels in the house, and sometimes that's difficult to do. Last winter during that 35 below period, I had 10 phone calls within the first day that I hear you're the guy, you got this camera, what are you going to charge to come out to my house and help me? The lady says, she says, I have water, my roof is leaking, I have water droplets on my ceiling. And I said, well, your ceiling's probably not leaking. And she says, well, how do you know without coming out? And I said, well, it's 35 below zero as we're speaking outside, everything's frozen like a brick. Right. And she says, well, what is it? And I said, do you have a humidification system? And she said, yeah. I said, what's it set at? And she comes back 2 minutes later and she says, 45%. And I said, we cannot have 45% humidity in the house when it's 35 below zero.
Right.
So these are things people don't know and they don't understand, and that's okay. But we need to educate them about taking care of the house, because excess humidity can create a mold issue also.
Right.
So, one thing leads to another. And so you have to be educated on the house. Every house is different, okay? Whether it's the caliber of the windows or the insulation values, and how that house breathes and reacts to the weather.
Okay, great point. What are some of the most overlooked safety hazards that you see in a home?
Oh boy. Well, the biggest thing is old smoke detectors. A lot of people don't realize that the manufacturer makes the plastic so it yellows deliberately, so that you look at it and go, God, that's old. We should replace that. So old smoke detectors are the number one. Carbon monoxide, lack of carbon monoxide protection in the house. That is the silent killer.
Yeah.
Simple things. How many times have I had a kitchen range without an anti-tip bracket on it for child safety? Probably 90 out of 100 inspections, there's no anti-tip bracket on the range. And if a 5-year-old leans on that open range door when the pot of water is boiling, they're going to wear it.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to outthink the problem before it happens.
Right. No, that's a good point. What about foundation cracks? When should a homeowner be concerned on a foundation crack? Is there any kind of a?
Well, it's all based on the age of the house, number one. If I have a house that's 50 years old with a couple hairline cracks in places, it doesn't bother me. Whatever was happening has happened. But if I have some newer construction and I have cracks that we have some settling issues, maybe the builder didn't do soil compaction tests, because I'll guarantee he didn't, then we need to monitor things. If necessary, I'll always call in an engineer.
Okay.
To shoot elevations. We can do soil borings to test the soil compaction at the footings. There's a whole realm of things we can do to figure out the problem and address it and stabilize if necessary.
Gotcha. Okay. What is one maintenance tip that could save homeowners thousands of dollars that you see neglected, or something that
I would say, believe it or not, downspout extensions, keeping water away from the foundation. I just had one this afternoon that there wasn't a single downspout extension on this house. We now have 8 to 10 inches of snow outside. Yeah. It's going to turn to 50 some degrees this coming weekend. And what if it decides to rain for 3 days and I'm going to dump all that water in melting snow right along this foundation? This is preventative medicine. It is probably, water is not our friend. Okay, when it comes to construction. And as simple as putting downspout extensions on downspouts to keep any roof drainage 5 feet away from a foundation is the one thing that can bite you and cost you thousands of dollars.
Oh, growing up as a kid, if I mowed the grass and I didn't replace the gutter extensions,
you're in a lot of trouble.
Oh, that was a major.
See, that's an old school dad.
I mean, the gutters were clean because he cleaned the gutters. So,
that's
but
awesome.
I mean, to this day, I mean, I see a gutter extension, I think of my dad, because it's like, God forbid, if I did not replace that gutter extension, boy.
I stress that to buyers all the time. I stress that I want to see a couple short little self-tapping screws in there so they don't fall off. I want positive drainage. No, you know me. I'm a freak about my construction.
And then if my dad could get his hands on some free dirt, that was
gold.
If we drove by someplace and they said free dirt on it, it was like guarantee. It's like, oh no, he's gonna
load up some buckets.
Yeah, it was time to load up the truck. Okay, Clark has a. How important is it to have a home inspection when purchasing new construction? I always recommend people have their own outside inspector when purchasing new construction. That's a great question.
Boy, I'll tell you what, you hit the nail on the head, so to speak. And David, you know this. I have realtors, and I have a whole, but aside from you, David, obviously, I have several hundred realtors that enjoy what I do to help their clients here in this area. And I have some agents that, poo-poo that, and they say, well, it's a new house. It's covered under the warranty. You really don't need an inspection. I will tell you, I will find more issues with most new houses right now than I do with 10, 20, 30-year-old existing homes. And it goes back to the days of my dad's generation when he looked at you and went, do it right the first time.
Right.
Just as an example, I inspected a brand new construction house in the area called the Preserve out here in Elkhorn. It's a brand new house, $3.2 million, 8,000 square feet. Okay, I found R19 insulation in the attic when the code dictates R38. And if we're going to build $3.2 million, we better be at an R45 for this beautiful climate.
Right.
I had a Wolf gas range in the kitchen worth probably $50,000. It was one of these 6-foot wide Wolf ranges with the red knobs on it and the matching hood. It was vented into the attic. Okay. Wow. I mean, I can talk all day. This is new construction. And this is not, entry level, $250,000 new construction. This is $3.2 million. Right. I walked around the back of the house. They were putting $600,000-$700,000 into the backyard, and the retaining walls didn't line up with the house. This is what we see. It is just quite bizarre to me, but it is the world we live in. I have one building manufacturer here. I won't name the name, but I will tell you 2 out of 10 homes I look at brand new have no insulation in the attic whatsoever. They just forgot to do it.
Wow.
It comes with the territory. Pella windows, a good name in a window, but the manufacturer requires that the operable sashes, if it's a wood sash, be completely primed and painted. I see them predominantly in our area in new construction. The painter sprayed them in a closed position. The perimeter of the sash is not primed and painted. I think you've experienced that with me.
Gotcha.
The list goes on and on. So when people say, new construction, should I have an inspection done? It could probably be the best thing you could do for yourself and your new house. And I'm not blowing my horn. It's just what I see.
And you just did one for me few days ago for new construction, and we got another one. I think a client in the chat that you'll be doing one for him as well. So,
awesome.
What are some immediate red flags that buyers can see that they should be aware of when they're looking at the home? Not even to the point where the home inspection is being conducted, but just what are some things that buyers should be looking at when they're just in the viewing process?
Well, I'll tell you what, everything tells you something about this puzzle of a house. And from the time you pull up, okay, and you look at it from a curb appeal standpoint, is it maintained? Okay, are things painted? Is the lawn cut? Are weeds growing everywhere? Are the retaining walls straight? Are the railings rotted and structurally unstable? Everything tells you something about the client that owns this house and how well it's been taken care of. Some clients are so particular, or I should say homeowners, that I'll walk into a house and I have no problem going, this place is beautiful. I'm trying to justify my existence, but you still got to pay for the inspection. Right. I don't have a problem doing that. But I'll tell you what, from a novice standpoint or not familiar with the business, when you're looking at a house, look at how it's maintained more than anything else. And you can tell how the house is kept. Is it tight or is it a wreck right off the bat? Because if it's a wreck right off the bat, there's going to be other underlying issues that you need me to see.
Talk about flips. Talk about and the quality of a flip and that sort of thing. Because I get really nervous around a flipped property.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of flips, it's all based on budget, and they come up with that budget before they even buy the property. They know what they're buying it for. They know what it'll sell for with certain amenities. updated, and they'll put that budget into it and not concentrate on anything else. So flips are a little scary. You definitely want to flip inspect it so that you know what you have. I've seen flips that look, let's say it's a 100-year-old house and it's a flip. Well, they've gone and they put a new roof on, they got rid of the asbestos roof. They put a whole new high impact shingle roof on it. They've got the chimney tuck pointed. They've got a kitchen remodel worth $50,000 to $75,000. They've got new flooring, LVP throughout the house. They've got new lighting fixtures, new windows throughout the house, and everything looks amazing until I go in the attic and find knob and tube wiring everywhere, which is a potential fire hazard. So they didn't spend the extra $10,000 to have an electrician get rid of the old knob and tube wiring and update the wiring in areas that most people aren't going to climb in the attic to see. So the flip scares me. And I'm not just talking a 100-year-old flip. I'm talking even a newer flip that had been a rental for 20 years and got beat up, and they put a little lipstick on it and put it on the market trying to make 30 grand. And whether it be a Federal Pacific stab lock panel, which we've addressed at times, that we can identify that is an automatic replacement in a real estate transaction because of the fire hazard, or knob and tube wiring, or a rotted flue for a furnace. It goes on and on. So flips scare me. If they're done right, that's fantastic. The bulk of them, there are corners that are cut, and we need to find them.
Right, and you go through enough of them, they jump right out at you. This might be a wild question, or maybe okay. What's the weirdest thing you have found on an inspection?
Boy, the weirdest thing. I tell you what, I'd have to dig deep back in the brain to come up with that one, David. I've had realtors tell me I should write a book because of the things that you come across during an inspection that just you would never expect. Hazard wise, I had a house out in Utah a couple months ago that had more bat poop in an attic than I've ever seen in my life. There were piles of bat guano. And a lot of people don't realize the bat guano poop causes hantavirus, which is a deadly virus in humans. And I think the buyer met me there and showed him pictures, and he goes, well, can we fix that? And I said, we need, insulation guys in hazmat suits and respirators to go up and vacuum out all the insulation, all the bat poop, screen out the bats, and then re-insulate the attic. And he goes, how much? And I said, probably $15,000. Well, he gasped, but you know what? That real estate deal stayed intact because the seller had no choice. Then now they knew they had bats in the attic. It was disclosed. There were pictures. If they want to sell the house, that's an investment they need to make, and they did, and everybody's happy. So it goes from weird to dangerous, but there's the whole gamut.
I had one a while back where they had the bats in the attic, and it was to the tune of $8,000 to take care of this bat issue.
Oh yeah.
And then I've had a couple raccoon issues.
I've seen plenty of those.
Yeah, and that was an interesting call when they called up and said, Dave, there's something furry in the in the rafters, and I'm like, well, let's not touch it or anything. And that's how it was.
Yeah, I've come face to face with a raccoon before in an attic, and it wasn't a pleasant thing. I don't know who is more scared, me or him.
Oh, this is a great question, Clark. Oh, this is one of my favorite topics.
Oh, yeah.
Do you suggest people get a sewer scan if they're buying a property with lots of trees on it to make sure the roots are not close to the pipes?
Very good question, Clark. I will tell you, I'm looking at what I call flags. And when I say flags, I'm looking at combined risk items. Age of the house, okay? Do I have a cast iron pipe as a sewer pipe going out to the street? Do I have a mature neighborhood, meaning a lot of big trees like you're talking about, especially deciduous trees? And then the ultimate is the new yellow, pink, or red cleanout plug in the sewer pipe that indicates to me that a plumber was in there recently, and why. And so David knows that quite often on homes with any of those flags, if not all of the above, that I will recommend a sewer scope so that we know the condition of that pipe. So yes, that's a very good question, and quite often I recommend a sewer scan.
And you've taught me that, Bob, where I have a lot of times I recommend my client does the sewer scan first.
Yes.
That way, if we have a big issue, now that takes a little money out of your pocket, which I apologize, but
no, I don't mind at all, actually, David. And I know you're very good at that you'll book the inspection, reserve a time and day. You'll do the sewer scan ahead of time. And if that comes back bad, where we're talking a backhoe at 15 to 20 grand, you'll cancel the inspection. And I will tell you what, I don't mind at all. Okay. I'm all about taking care of the client in the right way. And that is a good way to do it.
Exactly. And you're busy, and you're busy a lot of times, so you fill that spot right away. Anyway.
I can fill a spot within a day. I mean,
and sometimes you filled it for me. I know you've squeezed an extra inspection in there for
me. Oh, you mean like the last one we did that I said I'll be there tonight? Yeah, that one. Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Not a problem.
But I think that the sewer scope inspection is a big deal. Let's see. What we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. What issues do you typically find in new construction?
Lack of insulation, number one. Lack of compaction of soils around the foundation so that they're settling around what's called the overdig. And so it turns into a grading drainage issue. Right. Windows, especially if they're Pella or a wood sash window that aren't primed and painted properly.
Okay.
The biggest thing, anti-tip brackets on stove. Brand new house. The anti-tip bracket is in the bottom drawer of the stove. Yep. When I look in the kitchen. It just drives me absolutely crazy. But these are the things we find. So safety issues for kids more than anything. New construction, high-end new construction. I'll have a $1 million home, and the bathroom doors especially aren't painted, primed on all 6 sides, and the top and bottom are not sealed. The painter never painted them. I will find it all the time, and that door will warp. And we're talking about, an $800 million house, and we're going to have warped doors that the builder wants to argue with you about a year later.
Right.
These fall under preventative medicine.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there issues that you typically find with older homes?
Yes. A lot of times with older homes, it'll be the pest or rodent infestation issue in the attic, bats, mice, raccoons, like you said, knob and tube wiring in attic spaces where they didn't think anybody would look, where they've updated some of the knob and tube in the basement where you can see it to Romex, but not in the attic. Major fire issue. Okay. Remarkably enough, in this area, knob and tube by the electrical code is considered acceptable. Yet they do recommend that a licensed electrician evaluate it to make sure. But all they're doing there is covering themselves liability-wise. It is not a safe, installation anymore. You can't add insulation and bury it because it overheats. So the knob and tube wiring is a big deal. Grading and drainage, foundation issues, not so much, but if we have a brick home, a lot of times we'll need chimneys tuck pointed so that we can maintain the architectural value of the house, because some of these homes that have a brick chimney that's 40 feet high, it's a beautiful piece of architecture. With a little bit of general maintenance, we can preserve it for another 30, 40 years instead of having it fall apart. Those are issues that we're looking at with older homes.
Gotcha. Yeah. You talked about this. Talk about the stab lock. When did the stab lock electrical panels?
Yes, Federal Pacific is the manufacturer. Okay. Stab lock is the model of the panel. It's identified by red breakers. The breakers are all these red switches, and you can pick up on it right away. There's a possibility that they don't trip when they're under load. And in electrical, when that breaker doesn't trip, it overheats, which means potential fire. So the Federal Pacific Stab Block panel is something that even the realtors that I've worked with are pretty well trained in looking for this panel and know in their negotiation that that's something that's going to come up. And, from a price standpoint, you got to understand we can fix anything with time and money. Okay, it's just a matter of being aware of it and what is it going to take to correct this, regardless of the cost. And so a Federal Pacific Stab Block panel that may be, 150 amp panel means that we have plenty of amperage coming to the house, but we need a new panel. Well, you're probably talking about a $1,500 to $2,500 bill right there. Again, not insurmountable, but it needs to be done and we need to be aware of it.
And then the other thing that you taught me about is making sure that when you look at that panel to look for an inspection sticker that it was, because some people will hire Cousin Eddie or who's an electrician will do it, but they don't pull the permit.
Yes.
So that's something that I've seen caught on many of your inspections where it doesn't have that city inspection sticker to it.
Very good. Yes. So with older homes that had the old fuse panel or something to do with fuses, someone will have updated the panel to a new circuit breaker panel, which is fantastic, but there won't be a permit on it that the city came and evaluated the panel before they signed off, which means they didn't pull a permit, which means either their friend did the electrical, which there'll be telltale signs of that. I just had one yesterday. There's little signs, wires not stapled within 4 to 6 inches of an electrical box, hanging fixtures, all types of things that throw up a flag that tell you that it's a homeowner doing the wiring, which is the scary part.
Right.
Or what we'll have is a new panel put in, and this panel is tight, okay? It looks good. Well, I know darn well that a union electrician did it. Okay, that's a friend of the homeowner. Now the union electricians can't go pull a permit; they'll lose their job because they're not supposed to do residential stuff. They do commercial, and so they do it off the books.
Right.
We still want that panel permitted by the city for liability insurance and just overall coverage.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Fernando P. Let's see. My house is newer with an attached garage. In the summers, it gets extremely hot. I went into the attic and noticed no insulation on the side of the garage. Also, no soffit venting. Talk about that, because I've seen.
Attic venting is a big deal. We can cause humidity issues, mildew, mold, rot of the structure, the sheathing on the roof from the interior. So that's a big thing, is to have proper ventilation combined with the right amount of insulation. So if he's got an adjacent area to the garage that's not insulated, that garage can be putting a tremendous amount of load on the rest of the house. So that's something that would need to be evaluated. I would tell him to get an insulation guy in there, insulation professional in there to look at, because they'll look at the venting as well as the insulation values.
Gotcha. Oh, good question. Okay. All right. Clark says, what about polybutylene piping? I know it is more of a plumbing question, but I suggest people getting updated piping, PVC, etc. What do you suggest according to code standards?
Well, it's interesting in the Nebraska area, Omaha especially, that we've changed over the last couple of years to allow some of the new PEX piping, supply piping. They didn't allow it at all for quite a period of time. Now they allow it, but they don't want it mixed with other types of plumbing piping, meaning copper or otherwise. I have no problem with PEX. I've come full circle on PEX, being old school, wanting nothing but copper, to now looking at multi-million-dollar homes that are using what's called CPVC. So when he says PVC, I assume he's talking CPVC as far as the supply piping. And it's actually a very good product, and it's less expensive. And the biggest thing I didn't realize was theft with new construction. I was talking to a plumber about it, and he says, if we rough this house in with copper today, it's going to be gone by the morning. And that's the nature of the beast, that these guys will come and remove all the copper because of its value. So they're using CPVC with the supply piping. PEX is a good option.
Okay.
When we go back to talking about older homes, we want to look for galvanized piping. That's very common in galvanized. The ID, called the inside diameter, of the pipe corrodes and builds up deposits and narrows down. And so you can get a chunk break off and totally eliminate functional flow, as it's called. But that's something in older houses quite often that will look to make the recommendation to update the supply piping and get rid of the galvanized that's there.
Gotcha. Okay. What about asbestos siding? Can you talk about that, or asbestos?
Yeah, asbestos shake siding. Yep. Yeah. Years ago, asbestos, they wanted it removed, okay? And now the new recommendation nationwide is not to remove it, but encapsulate it.
Okay.
It's funny, I just looked at a house 2 days ago in Council Bluffs over in Iowa that had asbestos shingles on the outside of the house. And they were all intact. There was none that were broken. The stuff lasts forever. It's fire retardant, obviously, and it's acceptable. The only thing I told the potential buyer was don't make it airborne, meaning don't set up a circular saw to cut a new window in the side of the house and make this stuff airborne. If you want to reside the house, they won't break it up and remove it. They'll side right over the top of it with vinyl, steel, or whatever you want to do. So there's no problem with the asbestos shake siding that's out there. We just don't want to make it airborne.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had a rental. I think I had 2 rentals with that asbestos shake siding, you know, knowing what I know now, you know, yeah. Clark says, yep, people take copper piping around here and take it to the junkyard to make money off it. Yep, absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, I tell you what, let's, if people, I want to make sure people can get a hold of you. If they have an inspection, if they're going to purchase a home and you have a corspect.com.
I have a website they can go to, and up in the one corner up here, it says thermal in action, so they can learn about thermal imaging of what I do throughout the house. It's a very valuable tool. One thing that's incorrect in that video is I don't charge extra for it. It's just part of my inspection. But it's a very valuable tool, and it's nice to be the leader in this industry.
Well, I tell you what, I've really enjoyed working with you, Bob, over the past several years, and look forward to it in the future. And I enjoy going to the inspection walkthrough because I'm going to learn something. That's a definite. Clark says, great show tonight, David and Bob, very informative. Clark has a real estate, Clark the Realtor. He's from Atlanta, and
awesome.
And I'm going to be on his show, and he's going to be on my show in the next couple of weeks. So
that's awesome. Well, you guys all have to stay in touch.
Exactly. But hey, I tell you what, Bob, I really appreciate you being on tonight's program, and I think we covered a lot of ground and a lot of good information for folks to take away and that sort of thing. So I really appreciate that, and look forward to working with you in the future. And if anybody is looking for a great home inspector in the Omaha, what areas do you cover? How far do you go? You go Iowa too, correct?
Oh yeah, I cover probably out of just general Omaha. I probably cover a 75 to 100 mile radius of Omaha.
Awesome.
You know, my theory is if you have a client that you drove all over creation to help them with a house, I will go there and help your client.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Well, hey, Bob, I tell you what, I'm going to let you go. And thanks again for being on the program. And I'll take you off the stage here. And then see here. Appreciate tonight. And again, if you don't mind, if you're please give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. I always appreciate that. Hopefully you got a lot of great information and that sort of thing and enjoyed tonight. And without any other further questions, I'm going to let you guys go. And MH08 gives us a hand clap. All right. Terrific. Well, thanks again, everybody. I appreciate it. You make it a great day. And thanks again. Bye-bye.